Welcome to the Avenue G Church of Christ Sunday Adult Bible Class. This week we're talking about Paul in Athens, and we're still in the book of Acts, chapter 17, verses 16 through 34. What are we going to be talking about? Some of the discussions. We'll be talking about the philosophers at Athens, Athenian curiosity, proclaiming the unknown God, and God calls for repentance. The verse that we have chosen to go along with our study comes from the book of Acts, chapter 7, verses 48. And it reads, "However, the Most High does not dwell in temples made with hands, as the prophet says." And this isn't the only verse. There's a lot more that are in the Old Testament that goes right along with this. And this is a depiction of Paul being in Athens and talking to those who are there. And you notice all of the architecture around there, the statues, and these were made for their gods. And this is just another one. Of course, you see the man with the shield and the spear. I believe that's Mars. And of course, they're on Mars Hill. And this is a depiction of what it looked like back during the first century, there on Mars Hill. And this is a picture of it in the 20th century. I don't know the exact date, but I'm pretty sure it was in the 20th century. Just the same picture, a little bit different angle. And that's it. Hold on there. Before we start on this, let us pray together. Father, Most High God, deliverer and preserver of mankind, I want to give thanks to you, Father, for your grace and your mercy that you have bestowed upon us. Thank you, Father, for sending your Son, Jesus, to die so that we might live. We know that without you, Father, we have nothing. We know that our strength comes from above. We ask, Father, that you be a light before our feet to ensure that we take the right path and do the things that you would have us to do, to be examples for you and those who are around us, be example to others so that they may see you in us. Help us through this troubling time, Father, where so many are losing their lives and so many have come down with illnesses. Be with those, Father, who've lost their loved ones, especially those in the household of faith. Help us to stay strong, to be steadfast, and always doing your will. For these and all blessings we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, that brings us to where our lesson is. He talked about Paul's trip from Philippi to Thessalonica, from Thessalonica to Berea. And now our last lesson ends with Paul in Philippi, and we kind of skip Acts 17, 1 through 15. But we're going to start with Acts 17, verse 16 through 34, and I'm going to read it in its entirety. And it reads, "Now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. Therefore he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshippers, in the marketplace daily with those who happened to be there. Then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him. And some said, 'What does this babbler want to say?' Others said, 'He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection.' And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak? For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore, we want to know what these things mean." For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. Then Paul stood in the midst of Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.' Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Nor is he worshipped with men's hands, as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by the art and man's hand devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now command all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, while others said, "We will hear you again on this matter." So Paul departed from among them. However, some of the men joined him and believed, among them Dionysius the Areopagite, a woman named Damaris, and others with him. Okay, but before we start our lesson, I want to go to where Paul was left in Philippi. Okay, here is a map where Paul, Silas, Timothy, and Luke, when they went to Neapolis and then to Philippi. Now, Luke stayed in Philippi. I think I mentioned that Timothy also stayed, but Timothy didn't leave the group until a little bit later. And they left Philippi and went to Amphipolis, Apollonia, to Thessalonica, where the Jews chased them out. And then they went to Berea. And while in Berea, the Jews that were in Thessalonica came to Berea and chased them out of there. And then Paul went down to Athens. And in Athens, he is now waiting for Silas and Timothy. Okay, the first verse that we're going to start with is going to be number 16. And it says, "Now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him. He saw that the city was given over to idols." Now, Athens was a beautiful city. It was a Greek city, but it was ruled by the Romans. And it was well known for its magnificent architecture. Now, when the other rulers overtook Greece, Athens, they used to always take Greeks and send them back to their own cities, and they would build things and statues and whatnot. Now, Paul was disturbed by what he's saying. I mean, with all this beauty around, all this beautiful art, Paul was very much disturbed because it was all dedicated to idolatry. You know, and they had statues for every known, well, I won't say every known God, but they had statues for just about every God. And, you know, there was a saying in Athens, and it's rather funny. I don't remember who the exact person was that said it, but they used to say that, you know, that you could find a God easier than you can find a man in Athens. You know, while Paul was there, he realized that something was wrong, and, you know, and he already knew this, but it actually came to him that, hey, this is what it is. You know, the world through its wisdom didn't know God. That's 1 Corinthians 1:21. And verse 17 said, therefore, he reasons in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshipers, and in the marketplace daily with those who happen to be there. Paul, while waiting for Silas and Timothy, went to the marketplace, and he began reasoning or discussing. There was no great argument because these men like to talk about other ideas, especially about gods. He reasoned with the Jews and Gentiles. Now, these Gentiles that he's talking about, these are proselytes. They had to be because they're in the synagogue. And you might think, you know, well, why didn't he go to the Gentiles? Well, Paul didn't go to the Gentiles because he did what he always usually do. He didn't go to the Gentiles first. He did what he always do. He always go to where Jews were, to the Jews first, and then to the Greeks or the Gentiles. And verse 18 says, then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him. And some said, what does this babbler want to say? Others said, he seemed to be a proclaimer of foreign gods because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection. Epicurean and Stoic philosophers, and I think I'm pronouncing these right, but I heard them pronounced different ways. You know, in Athens, there were 4 well-known groups, and usually they belonged to one of these groups. Somebody belonged to one of these groups. There was the Academy of Plato, Lyceum of Aristotle, Porch of Zeno, and the Garden of Epicurus. And we're mainly going to be talking about Porch of Zeno and Garden of Epicurus, at least those 2 groups and those people that belong to them. Followers of Zeno, they were called Stoics. You know, Zeno taught his disciples that a man's happiness consisted in bringing himself into harmony with the cause of the universe. What they believe in? Materialism, many gods, pride. That was the leading fathers of this philosophy, especially that pride. Epicureans were atheists. Now, both of these groups put man before God. They made man a ruler instead of God. They recognized anybody as a god. They thought that pleasure was the chief end of human existence. They believed in pleasure. And what we have here, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, you have the Epicurean and the Stoics, you have pride and pleasure, or pleasure and pride. Both of them was hostile to the gospel, just like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Verse 19, and they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak. They took him, but they didn't take him by force. Not like in other places where they grabbed him and dragged him down the street. In fact, they didn't even arrest him, but they brought him along and they wanted to discuss with him those things that he was talking about. You know, but they weren't taking Paul serious because Paul was talking about some things that they didn't believe in, and especially the resurrection. In fact, you know, in verse 18, they had already called Paul a babbler. Now, in this word babbler, it was a seed picker, one who takes bits and scraps of information and passes it on as its own. And what we call that today is plagiarism. Somebody puts out some paperwork about what somebody else said and doesn't give that person recognition for what they did. They brought Paul along the Areopagus because they were curiosity seekers. They were curious about what he was talking. Acts 17, verse 20, for you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore, we want to know what these things mean. Now, you got to remember, no one, as far as we know, no one else had brought the gospel to Athens. This was the first time. Paul was on his second missionary journey, but this was his first time that he was there, and we don't ever read about anybody else going there before him. So I guess they had never heard of these things. They had never heard of this, what would they call this Jesus and God and this resurrection. And verse 21 says, for all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. Areopagus, the Latin form of the Greek word rendered Mars Hill. And, you know, that's where they were. It was on top of Mars Hill. It denotes also the council or court of justice, which met in the open air on that hill. They had a court, and they used to try all kinds of cases, especially those dealing with religion. And there was one thing that was known about Mars Hill, named after the mythical god of war who was tried here for murdering the son of Poseidon, Neptune, the sea god. And this was just one of the many squabbles of the gods. To tell or to hear some new things. They were just interested in obtaining some new knowledge, especially that of religion. Verse 22, then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. They were superstitious, but he had to be kind of careful about how he spoke to them. You know, they showed reverence to all. And they were given much to religious worship. And so much they worship everything. And, you know, Paul didn't want to insult them, you know, and you know, one thing about that, the Romans don't want you bringing up new gods. So they were in a Roman colony or one that was ruled by Rome. Verse 23, for as I was passing through and considering the object of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. God, therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. You know, you talk about this unknown God. They wanted to make sure that they did not leave anyone out. They had a God for just about covering everything. Well, Paul was telling them about this unknown God that they said that he was the true God. This unknown God they're talking about, he provided them with something that they could not place upon one of the other known gods. In other words, there was something that happened. Let's just say somebody fell from a 30-foot building and he didn't die. And they didn't know what God was in, so they didn't know what God to give credit for that, but we give that to the unknown God. Or somebody had twin boys born. Oh, this is a blessing. Who are we going to give credit to? We're going to give that credit to the unknown God. But Paul lets them know, but all the reverence they were showing, they were misdirected. This unknown God was the one true God. And it wasn't safe to bring in some new God. So he was going to use this unknown God and say, this is the real God. And say, God is not to say, just come in, that's not God, this is not God. He said, this unknown God that you're talking about, this is the real God. 24, God made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Does not dwell in temples made with hands. This is not a new thing. This is not a new saying. You can read about it in the Old Testament many times, and it was our verse that we use to correspond to our lesson. Acts 7:48. It's the same thing that Stephen said. True temple is not a physical house. In 1 Corinthians 3:16, we told that our bodies are the temples. 25, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. God is not only the creator, but he is the sustainer of all things. Why do you think that the sun doesn't fall? Why do you think that the earth stays in orbit? Why do we have different seasons, even though our seasons are kind of getting messed up? But why do we have different seasons and they come at the same time? God sustains these things. Without him, we have nothing. He gives all and is dependent upon no one. Verse 26, and he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. Now, don't get on this pre-appointed time and talk about, the predestination, because that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about times in the past where, hey, the Jews were appointed to be a certain place at a certain time and do certain things, and as well as other rulers who they have. And I think of Nebuchadnezzar, the things that he was supposed to do. And Alexander the Great, there were many of them. He has made from one blood every nation of men. Uh-oh. We all came from Adam. And blood is life. Blood of a Chinese man, if you give it to African and they both A positive, he's going to live. It's not going to do any harm to him. Then you have the man who has I believe it's O positive, and that's the universal blood type, and anybody can take it. But that just goes to show you that we're all of the same blood. We just have different types of blood, but we all are of the same blood. That's just like an Indian. If you had an Indian and you gave his blood to a Russian or a German, it wouldn't make no difference as long as they had the same type of blood. It's good. And one thing about these different, I guess you would call them races or ethnic groups, with the Jews, they always thought that they were the best, and they were no different than anyone else. And they always said, either you're going to be a Jew or you're going to be a Gentile. And then there came the Romans. Well, what the Romans said? Romans said, you're going to be a Roman citizen or you're a non-citizen. That's it. And then the Greeks had their sayings too. They say, either you are Greek or you're a barbarian. Verse 27, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. You know, it's like a blind man. A blind man is searching for something. Can you just picture this in your mind? He's searching very seriously. He's moving around trying to feel and find his way. He's seeking to find something, and we need to seek to find the truth in the same manner as this blind man is seeking to find whatever he's looking for. He is only far from us because of the effects of our sins. Verse 28, for in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. This is nothing new. This is not a new saying. It was said a long time ago, and not only by those who follow God. We are God's offspring, and without him, we would cease being. God is omnipotent, omniscient, and ubiquitous. He can be found everywhere. He can do everything. And in him is all strength. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by art and man's devising. An idol in no way can represent God. And one thing I want you to realize, these men were not stupid men. You know, you're saying they making these idols and worshiping them. No, hey, they knew that these idols were not God, but they represented their God. So, you know, and it's just like some today. We have things that images and places of worship and all kinds of worship that represent their God. But is this right? No, because the creator made the creature, and the creature cannot make a creator. And we're told we're not to make images of anything in the likeness of what is in heaven. Nothing on this earth or below it should we be making images of to represent our God. And it's something that's important. And we are not to bow down to them. We shouldn't be bowing down to any man. Because I remember what Peter did, and who was the other one? Peter did with Cornelius. Hey, I'm a man just like you. And I think that's what the angel told John. Verse 30, truly these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent. You know, most of the time when men ask him what he do, he would say that first thing he said, you must believe. And when he said believe, it wasn't just only believe, as some of those faith-only people would have you think, you know, and they would wonder right now, if he had said believe right here, those faith-only people would have run away with it. But he's saying something to represent all of what you have to do. But you got to believe, you got to repent, you got to confess, you got to be baptized. And we're glad that he changed it to repent instead of saying believe. And now there's a word, and I had to look it up. Synodeki, a figure of speech in which a part is made to represent the whole or vice versa. That's just what I got through talking about, repent. But he's not just talking about only repent, but he's talking about all you have to do. It's a God overlooked. He didn't punish them. And, you know, he mainly talking about the Gentiles, because the Gentiles didn't have a written law. The Jews did. But even with the Jews, when they sinned, they'd make a little sacrifice and they'd be forgiven. He wouldn't worry about them. They wouldn't have to worry about it for another year. Verse 31, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead. No man knows the day when God is coming back. Matthew 24:36. And Hebrew 9:27 said that after you die, you're going to be judged. We must all die, but then comes the judgment. There's going to be a day of judgment, and the appointed judge is going to be Jesus, John 5:22. And what's the assurance that we have that there is life after death? Well, that is because God resurrected Jesus. And as he did Jesus, so will we be resurrected. 32, and when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, while others said, we will hear you again on this matter. So Paul departed from among them. Mocked, they laughed at him, they ridiculed him, not believing what he said, at least that some of them did. But there were others who said, hey, we want to hear more about this. We're not going to go on what you said just now, but let us hear a little bit more. Like I think these were people, men, these were smart men. They wanted to think about what they were being told. Verse 34, however, some men joined him and believed. Among them, Dionysus, something like that, the Areopagite, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. Certain men did believe, and that means there were some people that were converted to Athens, but you don't hear about the church being started in Athens. At least I don't think you hear about one until about the 2nd century. Dionysius believed to be a member of the Areopagus court. He was believed to be a member of that court, and they say that he may have been a high member of that court. And then the lady, Damaris, they don't know who she was. There's nothing said about her. But there's some people who believe that she was Dionysius' wife. Now, some of those men, and then, well, after this, Paul left. He left those men. And that's going to take us until our next lesson. But let's look at the applications to this lesson, God has provided ample evidence to support our faith. We can conclude God exists by examining natural and special revelations. Looking at the creation, it is possible to conclude an all-knowing, powerful God made all things. Considering scripture, it is possible to conclude both that God loves us and that he has made it possible for us to have a relationship with him. As Paul addressed the philosophers in Athens, he answered 3 fundamental questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? None of these questions could be answered. Now command all men everywhere to repent. Repentance is not optional. It is necessary because of the coming judgment day, a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. Jesus' resurrection attests to the certainty of this event. The Athenians and all others have been warned at this juncture. The audience reacted to Paul's sermon. Some dismissed him and mocked. Some responded, we will hear you again on this matter. Paul left the Areopagus, and some men joined him and believed. Among them, Dionysius and the Areopagite, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. But those are the only 2 that were mentioned by name. Now we have a few questions, and I hope we'll make it all the way through. Oh, we're not through. God has provided ample evidence to support our faith. Wait a minute, that's it. Questions. What did Paul see in Athens that provoked his spirit? I'll put the answer down there, right? all the idols in Athens. What were the names of the two groups of philosophers who confronted Paul? There were two of them, Epicureans and Stoics. Where did Paul preach the sermon recorded in this lesson? Areopagus. If you said Mars Hill, that would be right too, but I think they don't mention Mars Hill in Acts 17:22. What did Paul say man should do? What all men need to do. Seek the Lord. What does God command all men everywhere to do? Acts 17:30. All men must now repent. How do we know there will be a judgment day? Acts 17:31. Because of the resurrection of Christ. How did the people respond to Paul's sermon? Well, some men joined and believed, and then some others mocked him. And that's the end of our lesson. I think we have one more, or at least one more, dealing with Paul. And I think it's with him going to Corinth. I hope you join us in our next lesson. Thank you. God bless you.